Hello, I'm Dan Murrell.
I'm Roth Cornet.
And Roth, today we are reviewing the Eli Roth directed remake of the Charles Bronson gritty crime drama Death Wish.
Yes.
Made in the 70s. I wouldn't say updated for today, but let's just say remade.
Remade,
and it's in theaters now. The embargo for this movie, I believe, didn't drop until last night, which is never a great sign for a movie, but we both saw it, and I have to say, first and foremost, apart from a lot of the other things that we are just artistically with the film, I was a little taken aback that it was released, to be honest, with the climate that's happening right here in the U.S., particularly regarding the issue of guns. I'm frankly a little shocked that this movie is being released, but it is, and there are things tied up with it that don't have to do with that. But that overriding anything coming out of the movie, that was my first thought. It was kind of amazing to me that this movie, with its subject matter and with a lot of its philosophies, is coming out.
Yeah,
but it is.
It sure is. And this is a movie that was delayed, and it was delayed, largely rumored that it was delayed because of the Las Vegas shootings. Now, to be clear, if you haven't seen the 1974 film, this is a revenge vigilante fantasy film. This is the kind of movie that people used to feel was a bit, and I think many still do, wish fulfillment, right? It's not unlike something like Taken in that sense. It's not unlike something like Man on Fire in this sense. This is a man whose wife is killed and daughter is injured and put into a coma by people breaking into his house. He is a doctor in Chicago who treats gunshot wound after gunshot wound and has, in some ways, by the beginning of this film, this is played by Bruce Willis in this film, become inured to the treating gunshot wounds. He's a little apathetic about it and takes a turn after this crime and becomes a vigilante. And for many people, that becomes sort of a wish fulfillment fantasy. This was delayed after the Vegas shootings, rumored, and now it's coming out. Unfortunately, there's been another tragedy, and it feels like a very odd moment for a film to be celebrating the idea of the one good guy with the gun. And this is a very violent movie. Very violent movie.
I mean, it's Eli Roth, and that if you know Eli Roth, you know what his sensibilities are. And I know that there are some that would say, well, the movie has characters, particularly there's a lot of morning kind of DJ things where it's like, let me talk about this Grim Reaper thing that's going on, and those characters inside of the movie express ambiguity about, is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? Literally, I think at one point a few times they're saying, is this a good thing or a bad thing? I agree with it. I don't. So there are people that say, like, well, the movie doesn't take a side. It absolutely 100% takes a side. The movie does have people in it who display ambiguity about Bruce Willis's character. Is it right to grab a gun and go out and take the law into your own hands? The movie itself, I think, unambiguously endorses what Bruce Willis is doing. So while the movie has characters that may not endorse what's happening, this is a movie that does, or at least seems to come from a standpoint that does, which again I think is there's a lot of room here to inject some nuance into it. And I don't think that it really was. I think that maybe Eli Roth thought that he was, by putting characters in this movie that are unsure about what's happening, but it's not. There's really not much nuance here. It's, hey, let's watch Bruce Willis slaughter a bunch of bad guys with big gore shots, big audience shots, and clap and cheer, and that's what the movie is tacitly encouraging you to do, under the guise of, we're also going to present some people that are saying, like, I don't know if this is a good idea. Down to the last shot of this movie, I'm sorry, this is a movie that glorifies it and glorifies Bruce Willis's character, and I just don't know how I feel about that.
Eli Roth is too heavy-handed a director to take on this film right now and to actually update it for a modern audience and to either play into it satirically or to definitively take a stand, because it is a movie, I feel, that is an identity crisis. And not just sort of there are the morning DJs that are sort of the voice of the audience saying, do we like this, do we not? But here's the problem. There's even one moment in the film that seems to be making the point, well, Bruce Willis's character is truly the only person that could do this because he is the good guy with the gun, right?
Right.
if anyone else were to try this, it would be a big failure and they would get killed. The problem with that is that the fantasy is still that we all are in the eye of the protagonist. So that means that everybody in the audience thinks that they're the good guy with the gun.
Right.
And that's the danger of that message. At the end of the movie, the police, the authority, sort of authorize what he has done. They okay it with a tip of the hat. I'm not spoiling anything. This movie can't really be spoiled.
Very conventional.
But there's a moment with in a gun store, which I think identifies just how lost this movie is to itself, where there's a character that's really over the top. And this is where you could have gone into satire.
Right.
And makes the idea of how easy it is to get really violent weapons of mass destruction. And I'm not talking about nukes, but just guns that can do a lot of damage. So easy.
It's played as a laugh.
It's played as a laugh. And then at the same time, brutal assassinations happen to characters that have not killed anyone, that there's no indication that they are going to kill anyone, that have committed a crime. But it's a movie that absolutely does not know what it's saying. It's got a split personality. And that's not even the worst part of this movie.
No.
It's terribly written. It's poorly acted. Bruce Willis is absolutely phoning it in and thinks no one will see this movie.
Yeah, Bruce Willis, I don't know what he's doing in this movie.
Nothing.
He could have. There was a chance for. There were many avenues that he could have taken it, but I mean, the beginning of this movie. I mean, it's like Shyamalan level acting, and I'm not talking about his acting in The Sixth Sense. I'm talking about the kind of acting that you see in the worst of the Shyamalan movies with The Happening and stuff like that. I mean, he's just he's basically drifting outside the studio. He's so detached from what he's doing, and then he kind of skulks around in a hoodie and shoots people and does what he does, but he seems to be sleepwalking through this movie. And maybe part of it is that his character is given, there are chances for him to kind of dive in and show some nuance, but he's never really given much of a chance. There's a part where there's somebody that's doing what he does that's not as successful as him. It's very brief. It's like a 30-second thing in the movie where somebody tries to be him and they get shot.
That's the moment that I'm talking about.
And he's watching it on television.
Only Bruce Willis could do this.
Right. And he's watching it on television, and I'm watching it and I'm like, okay, now this is a chance for his character to kind of maybe soberly reflect on what he's doing and realize that he just got someone killed indirectly. He just changes the channel.
Yeah.
And then we just go on from there.
And if a good director had done that moment, the fact that he's changing the channel would have actually been a statement about apathy and about an aspect of our culture, but it's not.
No.
Because I'm sorry, Eli Roth just does not have the dexterity and the artistic skill to navigate that.
No, I think that he probably, he loves movies from the 70s. I think that Eli Roth probably worships the original Charles Bronson Death Wish, and that he probably worships Bruce Willis.
Movie of its time.
And wanted to make a cool Death Wish movie where Bruce Willis does cool things. I think that the result of that is not subtle, not that it has to be, but it's not. The other thing that I think, and again, this is where it's invoked, but you have to do it subtly, is the whole setup of this movie from the first frame and then running throughout. The undercurrent is using the real life, literal life and death, horrible situation with crime that's happening in Chicago right now. That is invoked from second one, and it is using unambiguously the fact that there is a massive amount of gun violence with so many issues attached to that going on in Chicago. That is invoked as setting, as background for this story of this doctor. And again, this isn't like RoboCop where you have this future Detroit that is so radically crime-ridden.
You named the one director that could have done this.
Verhoeven, right.
Which I talked about this with someone else earlier today.
Yeah, it's not this version of Detroit in RoboCop that was so radically crime-ridden that he could go so over the top into satire and make the comment on violence that RoboCop was making. This is using, to me, and this is how it hit me, a very serious situation, a crisis in a major American city as set dressing.
Yeah.
And again, if you're going to invoke that, I just think I think it's borderline disrespectful to invoke that and then to do nothing with it other than to paste your very run-of-the-mill average story of a guy, gunning down people in the streets, but on the subject with the backdrop of a very serious real world situation.
Yeah, I think that the movie has two problems. One, it's a bad movie, just period.
It's just not great.
Whether it was
It's cliched,
problematic to
yeah.
release, it's cliched. It is every hackneyed trope from a 1980s movie of this vein, of this type that you could ever see. Every single character is 1 to 2 dimensions. The only person that's there to do their job is Vincent D'Onofrio. And Bruce Willis, and we know this, does a number of straight-to-VOD movies every year that he assumes no one will see. It's clear he thought this was one of them. And when he's acting with Vincent D'Onofrio, it throws just how little he's applying effort, Bruce Willis, in this movie into sharp relief, because D'Onofrio is, to his credit. And Bruce Willis clearly only decides to actually turn on the acting when he thinks someone's going to watch his movie. And he doesn't in this case, and I hope you don't, because it's not only poorly written, unevenly directed, and really lazily acted. It is problematic, because to have such a less than mediocre, just bad movie set in this environment and utilizing, like you said, like these real world issues to deliver such a subpar result
with no redeeming value.
qualities and no redeeming value, feels very problematic. It just does. It just feels, but I will say that I saw it in a fan screening. They were Eli Roth fans that were at the screening. It was a mix of critics and fans. And there were certainly people cheering at moments that I was surprised to hear them cheering at. So there is a fan base for this movie. It's not me.
I agree. There are going to be people that love this movie. It is shot and orchestrated, the kills and the angles and the dialogue to elicit cheer moments. And I'm sure that there will be people that see this movie and like it. You know, your job as a film critic is just to kind of express how movies hit you. This is a movie that I would not have liked no matter what time it had come out.
Yes.
I don't think. I just think that it is too cliche, too badly written. Yeah, I agree. Joe Carnahan has written so many great scripts. It's just totally phoned in.
The great. Come on.
Yeah, it just... Artistically, I don't think I ever would have liked it, but you know, you try to check certain things at the door. For me, there's some things that I can't, and I just too many issues in this movie on almost every level for me to recommend it.
I can't recommend it. I can't recommend that you don't see it enough, frankly. Joe Carnahan, to your point, who wrote this film, is a director that I generally really like. I unabashedly love The Gray, and I will defend that movie. But this is on every front lazily and poorly executed. It does not know what it wants to be or do. It does not take a stand on anything. And here's the thing. I want to be clear. I am also a person that has enjoyed and had the cathartic experience of enjoying a revenge fantasy movie. Inglourious Basterds is
Django
one.
Unchained.
Django Unchained. I'm somebody that just for the pleasure of watching it liked Man on Fire, you know, and it was a similar thing. But the truth is, this is such a carbon copy of a carbon copy of a carbon copy of any of those things that it's unenjoyable on every level. And they couldn't have known this when they were making it in incredibly poor taste to release this movie now. It's just an incredibly poor taste.
It just in addition to everything else, the timing.
But the main point that we can leave you with is
not a good movie.
It's not a good movie.
It's not a good movie.
It's a bad movie. It's just really, and I so rarely say this. This is a 100%. It's a bad movie. There are so many other things that you can go see this weekend. Midnighters, which is an independent film from a first-time director, is coming out this weekend. See that. It's not a perfect movie, but it is 1,000,000 times better than this.
As much as I was on the fence about it, I would recommend Red Sparrow over this movie. If you have to choose between two, I'd recommend Red Sparrow, even though I wasn't that much of a fan of Red Sparrow. So there you go.
I would go see either of those movies. You could go see a number of movies that are out there.
Yeah.
Do not go see this movie. Do not give it money. It is a bad movie, and it should feel bad.
Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty unambiguous. Thank you so much for watching Screen Junkies News. Until next time, I'm Dan Murrell.
What'd you really think, Dan?
Exactly. We'll see you next time.